Hey there, welcome back to the Free Black Women's Library YouTube channel. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. Thank you for liking this video and thank you for subscribing to my channel. Welcome back, y'all. Welcome back to the Free Black Women's Library YouTube channel, which is all about Rambly reactions to books, TV shows, movies, art, whatever it is that I find interesting and fascinating enough to get in front of the video camera for. Today I'm trying something a little different. I am using my Zoom to make this video as opposed to my phone. So we'll see how this goes. I think this background, which is a set that I designed, that I built and designed for film. I think this background really fits the era of the movie that I'm talking about, right? What do y'all think? Anywho, yeah, today I'm talking about Passing. Passing is a film that is currently streaming on Netflix. It is starring Tessa Thompson and Ruth Negga and Andre Holland, Bae from Moonlight. And it's directed by a woman named Rebecca Hall. Now, Rebecca Hall is also an actress, and I believe this is her film debut. If I'm wrong, I will correct that in the description box, but I believe this is her first film. And this film is based on a book of the same name, Passing, which is written by Nella Larsen. Now, Passing came out in 1929, so it did come out a while ago, and it does capture that era perfectly. It is definitely one of my favorite books, which is part of the reason why I wanted to talk about the movie, because I feel like the movie is actually exceptional in terms of how committed it is to its source material. It really doesn't sway from the story at all. Like, there are tiny little details that don't really seem to matter. Or, well, actually that's not true. They matter, but I can understand why they were changed. And I just want to give props to everyone involved for being courageous enough to create a film about this specific subject matter, because I know that it is triggering for a lot of people. And I have already seen online all the conversations that it has sparked, especially within the Black community. I don't know if other communities are talking about it, but especially within the Black community, people are talking about this movie, and they're talking about the concept of passing in general and the layers and complications of it. But the thing that's fascinating about the film and the movie is that it's not really just about passing. It's about performance and presentation. It's about the face that we put on, the persona that we inhabit, the role that we play to make sense of our lives, right? The role that we play to feel free, to feel happy, to feel safe, to feel content, to feel satisfied. That's one of the words that is used in the film, is satisfied, right? So I'm gonna put my blanket on because it's a little bit chilly. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. So yeah, so that's what the film is about. Passing is definitely a sub-theme, but it's not the main theme, yeah? So let's get into it. The story is about Irene and Claire, two women who perchance randomly bump into each other on the top floor of the Drayton Hotel, the luxury hotel. Now, in this hotel space, they are both passing for white. They are Black women, they are light-skinned Black women, and they're passing for white. Okay, now how did they land up there? That's the tea. Irene was on Fifth Avenue shopping for gifts for her sons. Her son's birthday is the next day, so she's getting a gift for him in this shop. And when we first meet Irene, she's got this hat on, it's cocked down, she's kind of hiding her face. And you would think, oh, she's being demure, she's being coy. No, she's actually trying to hide her face because she doesn't want the people around her to see too much of her face because they might discern that she is not a white woman, she's a Black woman, and then she would be put out, okay? So she ends up leaving the toy store, going out into the street. It's so hot. She jumps into a cab after witnessing this man faint across the street. The cab is like, oh, I've heard that it's really cool on the top floor of the Drayton Hotel. I guess they have AC, right? And she says, okay, let's go. Irene goes there and she's sitting there still in hiding, hat cocked down, sipping on her tea, when across the way, she sees this woman staring at her. And at first she looks away and the woman continues to stare and she looks up and the woman's still staring. Then the woman ends up walking over and it turns out that this woman is Claire. Now, Irene and Claire haven't seen each other in 12 years. They kind of knew each other back in the day in Harlem, right? Now they're fully grown women, married with kids. But in this moment, they're both passing, right? They continue to talk, and then they realize, kind of at the same time, that Claire is passing full time. Irene was just passing for this moment, just to get that AC. They go back to Claire's hotel room because it turns out that Claire and her husband are just in town on business. They're just visiting. They actually live in Chicago. So Irene has gone a long way from home. Now, all of this is so true to the book. I'm telling y'all, if you haven't read the book, and this might be one con, if you haven't read the book and you're watching the film, you might not get an idea of what's going on right away, but there's so much that happens in these moments, in these little moments within the book. Like the way that Nella Larsen describes Claire through the voice of Irene. She sees Claire as really beautiful, really enchanting. Her lips, her eyes, her nose, her hair, everything is just, it's so poetic, it's so romantic, it's so flowery, right? So there are definitely these queer undertones for me, for a lot of people. And it's not really clear if Irene is attracted to Claire or if she just finds her extremely beautiful. I think she's attracted. So moving on, they're in the hotel and Claire's husband turns up. He calls her a word as a nickname that's adjacent to the N-word because it seems like Claire is getting darker over time. And he says one day she might wake up and be that. So they all share a laugh because it's supposed to be a joke. And Irene goes into this hysterical fit of laughter, which is apparently covering up rage, a sense of awkwardness and a sense of rage, right? And once again, I have to give a shout out to this script adaptation because this scene in the book is also extremely tense. There's a little bit of a shift because in the book, there's 3 characters here, but I can see why they changed it because the story is really about Irene and Claire. So I could see why they took out the 3rd woman who was also passing. I'll try not to ramble too much about the book, but this is definitely a spoiler review, spoiler recap, spoiler reflection. So if you haven't read the book or seen the movie, I'm going to be talking about them both in detail. If you don't like spoilers, cut this video off now, go watch, go read, then come back. Boom. So Irene ends up leaving. She rushes back to Harlem and she is back in her home. Now, time passes. Claire has written to Irene a bunch of times. We see her script. We don't see Irene read the letters. We see Irene's husband read one of the letters. And once again, there's this really romanticized, flowery, sensual language that's taking place between Irene and Claire. Like Claire talks about having these wild desires to be with you again. And Irene's husband is just kind of like, interesting. The good doctor's like, what's going on here, right? But either way, Irene swears that she's satisfied with her life, right? She is the wife of a doctor. She has 2 boys, a maid. She's high society. She volunteers for the Negro League. So she's doing her civic duty for the community. She's playing her role. This is the path that she's chosen for herself. This is the path that she felt was right for her, right? We don't really get a lot of Irene's backstory, but we can see that she is all about this role, this performance, protecting her boys, being a good wife, running a household, and so on. She's passing as a wife and a mother, but is she a lesbian? That's one of my questions. Because she always seems to be pushing her husband's affections away, right? When he flirts with her, when he touches her. There are a couple of times when she seems into it, and then there are these moments when she seems like she's really not into it. And there are these moments when he talks about sex being the greatest joke of all time. And he says that he's tired of playing second fiddle to her Negro League. So there's a little bit of tension between them, and I'm not really sure what it is that's going on there, but she's definitely not as happy as she's claiming to be. Either way, Claire, after having her letters ignored again and again, her husband and her are back in Manhattan, and she comes up to Harlem and just pops in, just knocks on Irene's door, rings her bell, just shows up without being even invited. Now, this is very entitled of her. This is very pushy of her, but she's also, that's her personality. My hands are disappearing. That's her personality, right? She just shows up. She takes over. She takes charge. She has a very big personality. She's very dramatic. She's very playful. She's very flirtatious. She comes off as a little bit like of a rule breaker, doesn't really follow society's norms. She's disrespectable. Yeah. So they're on the opposite end of the spectrum, Irene and Claire, because Irene is very respectable with her gloves and her appropriate language and her appropriate attire and her appropriate Black doctor husband. Claire is like out here living her best life, partying with Black folks up in Harlem, and then going to her racist white husband down on Fifth Avenue. She's being messy, and she's playing a dangerous game. So Claire and Irene start to hang out. They start to spend time together. Claire invites herself to Irene's Negro League fancy function. There's a white author named Hugh. And even though I'm not a big fan of like the kind of token white character, I didn't mind Hugh so much because his gaze was not the prominent gaze and he was put in his place. And I really appreciated that idea of like the white gaze being shut down. That scene between him and Irene when they were talking, when she explains to him that Claire is actually Black. And when she says we're all performing, we're all passing as something, and when he starts talking about the exotic nature, or when they both start talking about the exotic nature of the dark-skinned Black man and the dancing, and they're trading barbs, they're having this banter back and forth. And then she just tells him, like, you're being an ass. Like, you know what I'm saying? We're human beings. This is not National Geographic. And you're taking it too far. You're starting to objectify, right? So I appreciated that because it was a really subtle way of shutting down the white gaze. Moving on, Claire becomes buddy-buddy with the boys, with the maid, and with Dr. Husband. She's all up in their lives, through and through, hanging out with them. The boys come home from school asking where Claire is. Her husband is like, oh, we want to make sure to invite Claire. We don't want to disappoint Claire. Like, Zoo, the maid and Claire are hanging out in the backyard, toes out, talking about who knows what. And Irene starts to feel a sense of WTF is going on here. My position as the matriarch, as the dutiful wife and mother of my house, is being pushed aside and being absolved by this woman from my past who is pretending to be white, first of all, which is a problem. Like, what's going on here? So, and I'm understanding why Irene is upset. I think it's very interesting that she accuses her husband of fooling around with Claire and he never denies it. Now, I don't know if he never denies it because he feels disrespected by the thought, or if he never denies it because something actually is going on. We don't really see something going on between them, but we do sort of see them standing close together, sitting close together, being a little bit too intimate for, yeah, it's a little bit too like, what's going on here, you know? And Irene calls him out on it and he doesn't engage her. So what's going on? And then at the same time, we do see that Irene is also attracted to Claire. Now, is this a sexual attraction or is it just a fascination? Tell me what you think. Because referencing the book, it feels like Irene has a crush on Claire, right? It does feel like that. And it feels like Irene is fascinated by Claire and she finds her very beautiful and very alluring and very enthralling. But Claire's trouble. Claire's trouble. And her character reminded me of the Danny Glover character in To Sleep with Anger. Because, and these two movies are not alike at all. But in To Sleep with Anger, Danny Glover plays this character who is somewhat devilish, for lack of a better word. He's a troublemaker who shows up and visits his friends and like never leaves and causes all this chaos. His presence causes all this chaos, but they're too polite to tell him to get out. This is who Claire reminds me of, right? Because Claire is very, she's just inappropriate, right? And she doesn't seem to care. She does what she wants. Now, something that might be missing for some folks who haven't read the book is that Claire's backstory is that she's an orphan who was raised by her white aunts, and they were very mean to her because of her being partially Black, right? Apparently they made her pretend that she was white because they were too embarrassed by the fact that she wasn't white. So she grew up in their household pretty much hating her Blackness because of the aunts who raised her. So we don't really get to see that, right? We don't really get to see that when Irene first meets Claire, it's like right when her father dies, and she's just like this lonely, poor, only child. And knowing that backstory and seeing how she behaves in the film, it kind of makes sense because she associates money with privilege, and she associates whiteness with privilege. And she feels like that's where she'll find safety, in money and in whiteness. But they don't really show that backstory in the film. But they do make it obvious that she is unhappy in her marriage. And the more she's exposed to Black life and Black culture, the more she wants that. The more she misses that. She feels at home. She feels alive, right? She's been missing that. She's been living with this white racist man for years. She had a baby by him and been all around white people. And she misses being around Black people. So this all makes sense to me. So even though, like, I don't think in terms of binaries, so I don't necessarily see Claire as a villain, but she is trouble. And she seems a little hyper emotional, hypersensitive, easy to tears, easy to crying, somewhat falling apart, frustrated with her life. And Irene might feel a little sorry for her, might care for her, but at the same time is threatened by her and is jealous of her. So one day, Irene and her friend Felice, who is unambiguously Black, are walking arm in arm. Mind you, this is a Jim Crow era, so if you see a Black woman and another woman walking arm in arm, most likely that other woman is a Black woman, okay? They're walking arm in arm and they bump into Mr. Bellew, Claire's husband. And he's like, oh, hey, what's up? Nice to see you again. And Irene is like deer in headlights, shocked, afraid. And he looks at her like, what's wrong with you? And then he looks over at the woman next to her and sees Felice, beautiful, unambiguously Black woman. And Irene is still standing there shocked, not speaking to him. And you can see his wheels turning because he's like, okay, you're a Black woman. If you're a Black woman sipping tea with my wife in our hotel room, that means my wife is a Black woman too. Irene and Felice rush off. Felice says, that was abrupt. And Rini says, when I met that man, I was passing for a white woman. They go their separate ways. Rini rushes home. And once again, I have to reference the book because this scene in the book, the way they stayed true to the subject material was so good. Claire isn't home. Irene doesn't leave her a message. Later that night, Irene, Claire, and Dr. Husband are going to Felice's house for a party. Felice lives on the 6th floor of this beautiful building in Harlem. Irene obviously still hasn't told Claire, hey, I saw your husband today and he probably knows you're Black now, so you shouldn't go home. She doesn't say that. They're walking through the snow. Claire and Dr. Husband are giggling at each other, being a little flirty. Irene is slowly walking behind them. And then they get to the inside of the building. And this beautiful staircase. They have to walk up this beautiful staircase. There's no elevator. I love this scene. I love this scene. They're walking and Irene asked Claire, what would you do if your husband found out? And she says, you know, like what would you do if your husband found out you were Black? Claire says, well, I do what I want to do. And she says, well, what would that be? And Claire says, well, I'd come up here and live in Harlem with you. Yeah, Irene does not like that answer, okay? She does not like that answer. So we continue to go up the steps. And like I said, I really love this shot, the beautiful tracking shot. The camera stays with Irene as she walks and looks and walks and looks and walks and looks. Beautiful shot. Then we get to the party. Everybody's having a grand old time, drinking drinks. Claire's being her usual flirtatious self, her usual fascinating self, her usual cute self. And Irene is just sitting there in shock, trying to figure out, how did I get here? My husband and the woman I'm in love with are in a relationship, possibly, maybe, and I'm just out here stuck on my own. This woman is trying to replace me. Possibly, maybe. These are just thoughts. This is conjecture. I'm just making this up. But she definitely has a lot on her mind, to the point where someone comes over to her and it's like, you know, what's going on over here? You're not talking to anybody. You look so forlorn. And she's like, well, y'all are just too clever. Like, I can't think of anything interesting or smart to say. So Irene has a couple of different moments like this where she kind of like doubts herself and puts herself down. So it seems like Claire has like caused her to question who she is, what she believes in, what she stands for. Maybe, possibly, maybe. I'm just rambling here. This is a rambly reaction. She goes over by the window and she smokes a cigarette. Mind you, they're on the 6th floor, the window's wide open, and she's just tapping her ash out the window, smoking. Irene is smoking her cigarette. Claire looks over and sees her smoking her cigarette and stands up and is looking over at her a little bit more and, you know, just checking her out. Someone says, oh, Irene, you're gonna catch a death of cold standing by that window like that. In barges John Bellew, angry as F, because now he knows that he has had a Black wife for the past 12 years. Because they got married when Claire was 18. Another detail from the book that they kept. Really like that. So he's mad, right? He's cussing out Claire, cussing at her. And Claire is just looking at him like, and they're trying to get him to calm down. Felice has a line that I love. She says, watch out now, you're the only white person here. So yeah, now he knows for sure that his wife is not a white woman, because Felice has confirmed, you're the only white person here. And Claire starts to just kind of shimmy over to where Irene is standing. I don't know if she thinks that Irene is going to protect her. Not really sure if she's just looking for a place to be safe. That's part of Claire's story, is like her lack of safety, right? She scooches herself over. John yells something and goes to lunge for her. Irene reaches her arm and hand out and pushes Claire out the window. Now, I read some of the comments from the folks who haven't read the book but saw the movie, and they were like, whoa, that ending. Yeah. Even though I read the book, I still gasped because, wow. So at first it's like, oh, did she push her out the window? Did she go to grab her? Yeah, she pushed her. Everybody runs downstairs as if she could survive that fall, but hope springs eternal. Meanwhile, Irene is just standing there with her arm extended, frozen in time. And then it almost appears as if she comes back into her body and she draws her arm in real slow. Well, you fixed that problem, Irene. Quick thinking, maybe? Disturbing, but yeah. You eliminated that problem real quick. Everybody rushes downstairs. Irene gathers herself together and she goes downstairs slowly. And she walks over to her husband. Is she dead? Yeah, she's dead. Her body's still there. Her husband is sitting across from the body in shock, possibly feeling guilty because he thinks that maybe the reason why she fell is because she was like pulling back from him. He looks worn out. Irene collapses in her husband's arms. He holds her hands and kisses them, which is a strange part of the body for him to kiss after she just used those hands to commit murder. And the cops rule it an accidental death because the people at the party confirm that no, he didn't push her. He reached for her and they're saying she fell. Slow pan as the camera pulls away, credits roll. Awesome. So that's the basic story. And let me just do my little time check to see how long I've spoken because I don't want to, oh my goodness, way too long. All right, real quick, I'm going to talk about my 5 favorite things about this film. The first one, the visual details, the set design, the wardrobe, the cinematography, the lighting, the makeup, the props, the camera angles, boom, boom, boom. I loved that it was in black and white. When I first saw the trailer, I was like, oh, damn, I really wish we had muted tones of color, but the black and white, they really nailed it with the black and white because this film is really about black and white and like shades of gray. All the shades of gray in between the colors of black and white. That's what this film is about. And it just, it really lent to the story. Visual details, boom. Number 2, the acting. Tessa Thompson and Ruth Negga are definitely going to get nominated for multiple awards for these roles. Now, I know I keep talking about the book, but they really captured the essence of these characters. Tessa really captured that quiet restraint of Irene, that wanting for perfection, that playing that role, that performance, that mother, that dutiful wife, that high society Black woman homemaker who is so caught up in her role, but also bored, also wanting more. Like, no, honey, you're not satisfied. And Claire woke it up in you that you're in denial. Ruth Negga really captured that manic, messy, flirty, extroverty, dramatic, very much all about joie de vivre, devil may care. I do what I want. I flirt with who I want. I dance with who I want. I, do what I want. Okay? I'm Claire. Like, Ruth Negga really captured that. She was very coy, very much with the big eyes and the lips and the giggling, the laughing. That's Claire to a T. Perfection. So brilliant acting from both these actresses. Number 3, the music, the soundtrack. Shout out to the composer, Dev Hynes. I hope I said your name correctly. The music was so good. That jazz, that little twinkling of the keys every time something would happen, every time we would get like a time jump, every time we would get a moment of tenderness, a moment of like sensuality, we would hear that piano. It was so good. Awesome music. Number 4, 5 things. Number 4, the themes that were explored in this film, okay? The theme of passing. As a Black person for this time period who had a certain look, it did give you access to certain spaces. It gave you access to work, to education, to love, to safety, to privilege, to money, to travel. So it's understandable why somebody would do it. But then there's also that sense of denial, right? I read something about passing to just kind of do a little prep for this video. And one of the things that is said, like people who pass talk about how you get the privilege of passing as white. So you get privilege to certain things, but you also, the downside, they say, is that you don't have access to your own community anymore because you need to totally deny your Black self. And you get exposed to the true racism of white people because they will talk about Black people in front of you in a way that they wouldn't talk about Black people in front of a Black person. So the real racism, real prejudice, the violence of racism, the ignorance of racism, the hatred of racism is exposed to you with no filter. And Irene experiences that through Claire's husband. So yeah, that's one of the themes, but also there's the theme of performance and portrayal and pretending, you know, and just playing a character, playing a role, right? Irene is talking about how she's a mother. Like when Claire says being a mother is the worst job there is. And Irene says it's worthy, and it's about being worthy, and it's about being responsible. So there's that. And then there's protection. Like, what do you do to protect your life, to stay safe? And Claire was passing. Irene committed murder because her life was being upheaved by the presence of this woman. So performance, pretension, ambiguity, the shades of gray. That was also a theme I wrote down. You know, neither one of these women are doing what's right or wrong. They're just doing what they feel like they need to do to exist in this time period. As a light-skinned Black woman in the Jim Crow era, you know, what do you have access to? A racist white husband, a rich doctor husband. And then the 5th favorite thing that I have on my list is the subtlety. Now, I know a lot of people, I saw people critiquing the film. They said it was like really slow and really boring, but I actually really like that slow, subtle unfolding of a story. I found it very captivating and very enthralling and very intriguing. Now, once again, that might be because I read the book, I don't know. But I really appreciated the subtlety because whenever something big would happen, you knew that it signified something. Now, what do I mean when I say that? The flower pot falling out the window and crashing to the ground. That was some foreshadowing stuff, right? That scene was extended and I was like, what is it about the flower pot? Then once again, we have another scene where we have this beautiful teapot that breaks. And Hugh tries to act like the reason why it broke, like the reason why Irene dropped it is because he knocked into her, but he didn't knock into her. I don't know if she dropped it on purpose or if she dropped it because she was angry, but either way, she dropped it. It shattered into a billion pieces, just like the teapot. And she talks about, when Hugh says he's sorry, she talks about how she's always wanted to break that thing. She's always hated it. But she never could figure out a way to get rid of it because of what it represents. You know, it's connected to the Confederacy. It's connected to another era that is anti-Black and anti what she believes in. And now that it's broken, she's happy to be free of it. Claire was the kettle, okay? Claire was the flower pot. Yeah, there were a lot of cute little subtle moments like that. That scene when they were in the backyard and she used her coat to cover up Claire, when Irene used her coat to cover up Claire's feet real quick. That to me was giving respectability, like what type of lady would have her bare feet out? Yeah, so that was the fifth thing. So I have 5 things: visual details, acting, music, themes, and the subtlety, the softness, the fact that the story, they didn't hit you over the head with the story. They gave you like little tidbits and you just had to add your own ideas. I like when I get to add my own ideas to a story. And that's what they gave us with that. You know, and there were a few little holes, like I didn't really understand what was that thing about Irene passing out? So maybe y'all could tell me about that. Like she was taking some medicine or passing out. I'm not sure what she was going through. Maybe she's depressed. Maybe they were trying to say that she was depressed. I'm not sure what was happening there. I'm not sure how nobody saw her push that woman out the window. I feel like her husband thinks she did it, and that's why he was kissing her hands. I'm not sure, but either way, all in all, I really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was extremely well done. Shout out to everyone involved. This is a long video, so if you watch the entire thing, I appreciate you. If you don't, I appreciate you too. Give it a like anyway. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought of passing the film. Let me know what you thought of passing the movie. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. I'll see y'all in the next video, not you guys. I'll see y'all in the next video. Thanks for your support. Bye.